that's actually a perfect example, because we have to communicate what's going on. And things get in the way. So we might have expectations of how things are going to go. And then usually what happens when we get upset is because we feel cornered, like we feel like it didn't go the way I was going to go. So part of conflict resolution, which we're going to talk about, is what other ways are there to look at this? And so this is one way. It's not the most optimal way, but it will work.
I love it. It's like we're doing the experience right now.
That's right. Very experiential.
Deep breathing over here. Okay, so certainly Caregivers of British Columbia, we're a nonprofit organization. We've been an organization for 30 years, and our mission is to provide caregiver support and education, and also collaboration and engagement with healthcare professionals. And so a part of that is what we're doing today, is providing webinars and educational material that we know is relevant for you as a caregiver. So thank you for staying with us and watching us fumble a bit, and we look forward to presenting. And then our presenter is Tricia Wallace. And, sorry, the next slide is webinar instructions. Yes, so you're on mute right now, your cameras are off. And until prompted, however, we did just prompt you to give us a little insight. So the chat box can be used if there's things that you want to share, or you're having conversations. We encourage you during the presentation, but for the Q&A, which is at the bottom of the screen, that's where you can put questions in. If something pops up during the presentation, wonderful. You can write in your question. We will get to it at the very end. And so we'll have time then. So thank you for that. And then we have our presenter, Tricia Wallace, and thank you for coming back and making the time to share your expertise. Tricia's background includes 31 years of nursing experience in the field of mental health with adults of all ages in hospital and community settings. She's also worked as a nurse educator at UBC and Langara College, and in 2019, Tricia finished her counseling psychology, gaining experience in many areas of therapy, including a 10-month practicum in addiction recovery that involved individual and group counseling. And she's currently a clinical counselor with Parkinson's Society BC, where she provides therapy, information, and support for individuals, couples, and families living with the impact of Parkinson's. So thank you so much for joining, and let's dig in.
Great, thanks for having me. So what we are going to do today, and we'll just have to see how things unfold for time, but we're wanting to introduce the concept of conflict. And not only the concept, so sort of offer some experiences or examples of experiences that I've heard over the time that I've worked with people, and present them to you and see if any of them kind of resonate with you. And we also are going to be looking at emotions and behaviors associated with conflict. What are the needs and some of the values that inform emotions and behaviors, and what are the thinking processes around them. And then I'm going to, at the end, provide some problem-solving techniques, some strategies. And I've kind of packaged them up in 3 different ways. And you might draw on that, actually about 4 different ways. And you'll see what elements of those resonate with you. What do you think would work for you? What inspires you to move forward to try something that might make conflict seem a little less daunting in your life? So conflict itself is natural. Everyone experiences it. And it can be defined as a collision of seemingly incompatible needs, drives, wishes, or demands. So it's more than a disagreement. Conflict can leave an uncomfortable feeling, a sort of a resonating agitation or pain. Something might stay with us. And it can happen with one person in a party, can come away with that experience. Sometimes many people in the engagement can come away with the experience of conflict. So it really can show up in different ways, and that's what we're going to review. So as caregivers, you probably all likely experience the collision of your needs and the needs of the people that you care for. And balancing needs is a big element, right, for you. So here's an example. What can be done if you get a call from the hospital and they say your care partner's coming home today and you don't really have things set up as you'd like to because you've hurt your back. And you know, oh boy, this is going to be something else. I really want to look after myself, but I've got this freight train of need coming my way. What am I going to do now? Those sorts of situations come up all the time. Or perhaps a situation where different roles that you have. So you have a teenager, they need help with something, something's gone off with them, or they need help with their project, and then your hours at work get increased, and then the person who you are caring for has a bladder infection and starts to get really confused. So these sorts of things are always coming up for people who are caregivers. Different forms of conflict. So we have conflict between two people, so that would be interpersonal. And that might be two siblings making a decision about a caregiving process. And it could also be between, you and the person that you're caring for. Intrapersonal conflict is that conflict that we feel within ourselves. So that would be the first example of that, the sore back. Wanting to have some freedom, for example, but also feeling obligated through love, through connection, through wanting to be obligated, but at the same time having to go negotiate our own needs. Interrole conflict is between taking time for work, like the second example that I just gave, taking time for your caregiver role and trying to figure that out. And the last one is intra-role, and that refers to while we're in the same role, for example, in the same role as caregiver, we are having to honor requests of two different people. So that last example with the children is sort of the same thing. If you have more than one children, or one child, or if you have more than one person who you're caring for, like parents, for example. So I think it's important that we look at conflict. It's a seemingly collision of seemingly incompatible needs. But there are some ways to review what we feel or what we see as incompatible. And one part of that is to review our thinking around conflict. So social learning theory talks about thinking processes, and these can either help us or they can hinder our ability to work things through. And one of the elements of this is to look at our assumptions and our view of what's going on. Because we can have biases. We can bring bias into the everyday engagement that we have with people. If we have an understanding of a family member from decades back, oh, they're this way, and we kind of hold onto a judgment, that kind of bias plays into what's happening today as you're talking through an issue about caregiving, for example, with them. So we want to, as this slide says, sort of wash our windows, kind of clear out and think about the biases that might be there, and we might have a clearer view. And we also learn responses from other people and those around us over years and through our own experiences. So that can also filter into our thinking processes, because if we see certain cues in the environment, if they were threatening before, we might interpret them as being threatening now, but they might not be threatening now. And we may have to think about that in the process of working through conflict and really put on an observational lens, really put on an approach that says, okay, I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to figure out what's going on with my clear view in mind. Sorry, I'm not sure what to say. There we go. Needs and conflict. So there are, the list of needs here actually comes from a study that was done by Pini and colleagues in the UK. So they studied 42 caregivers for people with dementia, and they asked them about their needs. And so a lot of them answered, in the 80s and 90 percentile, they thought these needs were important. But which need do you think of feeling close, control, freedom, connection, protection, caring, sort of your own, being your own person and sharing and being able to share openly and then getting things done? Which do you think was the need that was least important to them? It was getting things done. I thought that was interesting. So that was like 67% thought getting things done was important on reflection of their needs. And yet, caregivers can spend most of their time, physical energy, mental energy, getting things done. And then the needs for belonging and self-recognition and awareness and emotional connection and fulfillment, those are the things, if we look at this triangle, that tend to get left aside. We don't give ourselves enough time to really explore what our needs are because we feel like we're spending so much time getting things done. Yet the needs at the top of the triangle are the ones that really feed hope and compassion. They're the energy, they're the fuel that give us energy and direction. So Chen and colleagues did a study about hope in conflict resolution and looking at its benefits. And hope is a vital coping resource. It enhances human experience, it supports goal-directed behavior. So when hope is combined with confidence, those two things, then action occurs. We feel like it can really make things happen. In a sense, we have wings. We are reminded we have wings when we have hope. But hope can get interrupted, and often it can get clouded, and that's usually around emotions. Emotions can kind of filter out and kind of displace the hope that we might have felt. And that can really influence our responses to other people. So emotions in conflict are many. We might feel all of these. Actually, all of them is really all of them are normal. They happen quite often for most of us. So when we power through a stressful time, we often override our emotions. So if stress is prolonged, it can easily cause us to meet a breaking point. And then we can either shut down and feel sort of numb, or we can be really sensitive to emotional experiences and have an extremes of emotion quite easily. It can happen really quickly. So the more we identify and name emotions, the more effectively we're going to be able to figure out what our needs are. So that they can be almost like a filter between what we're feeling and what we need. So we really have to look at the feelings and use them as a gauge. What are we feeling the most of? So the needs in the lower portion here, or the feelings in the lower portion, are usually associated with needs that are met. And the feelings in the upper list are usually associated with unmet needs. So as a gauge, there's a lot going on at the top. That's a sign usually that we are feeling, we really need to work on our own needs and figure out what they are, and then ask for some support around them. So the caregiver can be really left with an impossible choice though, and you can have in conflict both of these types of emotions playing a part. If we have a deep love for a parent and we want to show connection and open-heartedness to them, we might then offer support to them without question, giving them as much as they want, not asking for our own needs to be met. And then that means that there's some losses on the caregiver's part. And that can lead to despair. It can lead to loneliness. For example, having to quit a job to be a caregiver, having to not put time into a love relationship because there isn't that time due to the caregiving role, for example. So we want to try and figure out, and it is possible to still honor the love and all of the positive things that you want to share with that parent, for example, with that person in your life, and still get some of your own needs met. So I talked a little bit about how do you know when your needs are met? That's a question that each of us has to answer. What does that feel like? What does that look like? What kind of behaviors are we showing? What patterns of behaviors are we showing when our needs aren't met? And sometimes that can happen when other people see us and observe us and go, well, you're testy today, or wow, you didn't have to talk like that. And sometimes we're like, what are you talking about? And it could be that these emotional things are coming to the forefront, and they can actually cloud our message to other people. So it's really important to explore what our needs are, what our boundaries are. How do we know when enough is enough? And then how are we going to go about expressing them? And that's part of conflict resolution, is to look at some strategies that work for us, that sit right with us, and that seem to work, to be able to make sure that people know what our needs are, what our expectations are, or at least we can ask. How can we ask other people to be with us in the process of caregiving, for example? And values are also part of this process. We are going to be trying to figure out which directions we want to go to when we're talking about our needs, and values really are about those directions. So values are not a goal. They're the directions we're moving towards, and goals are what we want to achieve along the way. So values, goals can be crossed off a list. A value example would be, you want to be loving and caring and supportive partner. And that value is going to influence your behaviors. A need or a goal is if you want to get married, and then you get married. You have that event occurs, and then you've met that goal. So that's the difference about values. They come along with us, and they don't really end. They can change, though. So the caregiving role can really have us question our values, can really have us explore some of these questions. What's important to you? And what do you care about? How do you find that in your caregiving role? What helps you stay on course? Which values are you reconsidering? That's a big one. And how does your behavior get influenced by values? And values affect all parts of our lives. They can shift with life experiences. Chronic illness, of course, is a huge issue to explore, and spiritual values as well often come into that. We can have a distinct difference between our own personal values and the values of those that we care for. And that becomes really important in the caregiving role, because often the primary caregiver or caregivers are having to give voice to the values of the person that they're caring for, because that person can't talk for themselves anymore. So being really clear on our values, but also really being clear on what reflects the values of the person that you're caring for. is also an important exploration. And there's exercises that you can do on your own. There's online ones that you can work on. And there's also value exploration that you can do with a counselor. And also there are community settings. There's trained support staff, for example. Family Caregivers of BC can help you work through some of these caregiving issues, as can NIDIS. And just being able to explore issues. And these become even more intense with the value stuff when it comes to end-of-life planning and what we hope and want for the one that we're caring for. So here's an example that I thought it might be quite current for people, and it's around social distancing. So here's the example. The primary caregiver requests respite from other family members, but that help is declined. The reason is that a lack of social distance might increase the risk of transmitting coronavirus. So family members saying, or friends, whoever that care network people are saying, I can't come over, I can't help you, because if I do, I might put the person that we're caring for at risk. So I'm kind of doing this for you and that person, because I don't want to put them at risk. So here the primary caregiver has to make a decision that honors both their values and expectations of their self and also of their care partner. So they've got to attend to both values and needs for the both of them. I don't know if any of you have had to make this hard decision, but it is certainly something that I've heard over time since COVID started. And these are the sort of inter and intrapersonal conflicts that might emerge, as well as all types of conflicts. So these are the examples then this is an example that we can kind of pull through the next few slides. So here are some fundamental guidelines to explore family conflict. I like these as sort of a starting point, because they talk about focusing on the self. So be hard on the problem, not the other people. Understand that acknowledging and listening are not the same as obeying. So we can hear what people say. It doesn't automatically mean we have to do it or feel forced to do it. That brings up a lot of defenses in us. That can make our emotions rise, and that can cloud our message. Use I statements. Less judgment, talk about yourself, don't judge others. Give people the benefit of the doubt. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit in the next slide. Keep an open mind if you can. And the real-time discussions may be very hard because people are tired. It might not be exactly the right time. But as soon as possible after some conflict occurs, you might need to, what they say, strike while the iron is cold, wait for things to cool off a little bit, but then revisit it again. It's effective to talk about it when you can, rather than just shutting it down, putting it away, and not talking about it later. Keep the conversations going as much as possible. So if it doesn't work one time, say, I don't think this is working. I think we're all pretty heated up right now, but let's talk about this next week. Let's talk about this tomorrow. So make time and offer the opportunity to do that. And here's another one. To what end are we talking? Why are we in this conversation? And sometimes that can go really off track in a discussion, in an argument. And the question to ask is, would I rather be happy or right? Or would I rather have harmony in this caregiving situation? Or do I just want to be right? And the last one is be easy to talk to. And I think that really is about all of the things above, right? Creating an environment, having a certain attitude that makes it a little bit easier to talk to overall. So here's the conflict process. And I've sort of augmented a few references along the way here to pull this together. But in this linear sort of process, we can still kind of move. It's not like a stage thing that just stays static. But it does help to sort of take apart and look at the elements of conflict, and then how we might be able to respond more effectively in parts of the conflict. We might not be able to fix it all, but if we break it down little bits and say, oh, I can do a little bit of that, I can change a little bit of that, the potential for you to move through that conflict is going to improve. So pre-existing conditions are looking at what came before, what sort of water has gone under the bridge for you and for others in that room, in the conversation. And in the case of the COVID situation, we might want to ask, is the person who we're asking for help, are they familiar with a caregiving role? Do they have an idea of what needs to get done? Or may they be interpreting this as sort of an all or nothing experience, like you need to look after our parent and I need you right now and this is what I need. And the person might just be like, so are they familiar with the role? And have you had any communication in the past that's been challenging? That right away is going to be re-triggered, right? Siblings, for example, sometimes it's a competition that comes up. One sibling feels like they have to know the parent better than the other one. And when you trace that back, they've had competitive interactions like that since they've been little. And so they're sort of bringing that into the current day situation. And this is gonna really influence. So there's just like different previous experiences and also communication styles overall that you want to look at. So for the next one, we want to explore what we're thinking about and what we're feeling about the situation. So referring back to the earlier slides, what's going on for us and how are we feeling about it? So we want to be able to try not to blame ourselves, try not to blame other people, and just settle into what we're feeling. Is it fear? Is it anger? Is it exhaustion? You're just overwhelmed. What's going on for you? And when we do that, quite often that sense of safety and security and what we're looking for becomes more clear. We really want to be able to establish a sense of safety for ourselves, and that will help us to be the person who helps to create safety for everyone, especially for primary caregivers. The response to conflict, again, how are we responding right now? To be honest with ourselves and to think about, okay, I responded this way, and yeah, that was probably too much, or I did a pretty good job. You know, we were able to surf through some of these worries and this argument in a way where I kept my composure. So I really want to congratulate myself for that and say, hey, I did this without yelling, for example, when someone else was yelling, for example. We want to be able to look at some of the safety behaviors, and those are the ones that are noted below. So are we avoiding, are we procrastinating, trying to do everything ourselves? Or alternatively, we might feel then, if I can't do everything myself, you do it all then. So there's some of that can go on when we're just completely overwhelmed. It's like, you take over, I'm done. And those are behaviors that usually happen when we're in emotional overwhelm. So if we know when we're emotional overwhelmed, those are the type of behaviors that we might see. And so those are cues for us to know, hey, can't make very clear decisions right now around that. I got to go back and look at how I'm feeling. and what's going on. And the responses then to the conflict could be how to navigate and accommodate, how to talk about that. For example, might be, you know, I really love mom and I want her to be as safe as possible, but I'm starting to feel low. I'm starting to feel numb and it's not healthy for me. So I need to be here for her long term. I just really would love for this to be more of a family experience. I want other people here with me so that I can, you know, work through stuff and be here long term. So that way you're talking to the family about your needs and using I statements, and that kind of is different than you better do this because it's expected. And family members, when the caregiver talks like that, the family members might start to offer insights. They might talk about risks that the caregiver hadn't thought about, or they might just be able to explore some alternatives that you hadn't thought about before. And so that's part of that, keeping that open mind to what they've been doing. And then we're sort of moving into that, you know, actions phase in this case, right? What are we saying, and how open are we to hear what other people are saying? And then the next piece is also just figuring out, what are we going to do? Planning. What are we all going to do about this? So I have an idea of what I want to do. You guys, I've heard what you guys want to do, but that's not going to work right now for me. And I don't think it's going to work for our parent. So how are we going to brainstorm around some other ways that we might be able to agree on? And so another cautionary as we're looking at outcomes and actions is to say yes as much as possible. That's another way to keep your mind open. So sometimes people will come in and they kind of just parachute in and they're like, okay, I think you should do it this way and this way and this way. And the primary caregiver is like, yeah, I think I've tried that. Or nope, that won't work. Nope, you can't do it like that because she has to take her medications at a certain time. And nope, you can't do it like that because that bed's over there and you can't transfer her properly. And we start to kind of do no right away. But if we want to really invite people in to that space, then we really have to say yes as much as possible and figure out, for example, what does that break look like? So if you want to increase cohesion and work toward the goal of giving that caregiver a break, that might not mean people coming into the house, for example, during COVID. It might mean giving the caregiver an emotional break, sending them more texts, calling them, letting them have a chance to share and vent about what's going on. It could be instrumental, it could be making meals and sending them to the door, helping to pay for some takeout or some other meal service. It could be getting a chance to sit with the loved one, the care partner who's being cared for, outside in the yard, come for a few hours, set up an umbrella, and just be there with the person while the primary caregiver gets to take a break. So we have to look at how to overcome our fear and worries about the risk of COVID by looking at what will accommodate and what might be more effective overall for the whole family. So here's another crucial conversation this comes from team leadership, actually. And I thought, well, this is a good one because it's sometimes the care partner is like a what's the word? The care partner is like a CEO and kind of at the helm of caring. So starting with the heart is a game, looking at your own position first, figuring out, starting with yourself first. What do you want, etc. This is sort of like the same thing over again in a different list. Learn to look, be observational, try not to be judgmental, figure out what's going on for yourself and others. Make it safe again, be as calm as you can when you're talking. Try to be as respectful as possible and show mutual respect for other people in that process. Figure out what your own narrative is. Figure out what your own story around this is before. So you don't want to go into a situation where there might be some conflict, or where you expect there was some conflict. You don't want to go into that with telling your story for the first time. You want to kind of get your story down. And then that offers some more reflection for yourself. And it also helps you to realize, would this make sense to someone else? How am I going to help to make sense to someone else? And of course, then the other part is sharing stories, other people's stories. So you talk with them about the facts, and you talk with them about what's going on with your story using the facts. So you take the emotion level way down and you look at the observational stuff and the facts and what you're observing and what's happening as much as possible. And of course, then you're going to be wanting to hear what the other people are talking about in terms of their stories. Again, looking at observational things and facts, trying not to use judgment, all of those things. So you're showing it, and then you're going to say, expect that back from the people who are sharing in the conversation that is causing a conflict. And then look to moving to action again. So to figure out what areas do you agree on, and that you can agree to disagree, and that what can you move forward with at this point that is accommodating, that offers some benefit for everybody. And then slowly look at other issues that might be necessary, and you want to look at them, but you got to start somewhere. And that's a lot better than an all or nothing process of can't do it all at once. And sometimes we feel like we need to, that's not always possible. So overall, these strategies are about finding a balance. Finding out the risks and benefits. That's one really good way to use an observational stance, is to look at a list. What's the benefits and what's the risk of moving forward or not moving forward with whatever plans you might be thinking of? And remembering that letting go is not the same as giving up. So especially when it comes to feeling like you have to do everything yourself, there are lots of opportunities where other people might come in. They might not do it as well as you. They might not do it in the way that you think is most optimal, and they're going to make their own mistakes. But we've all made our own mistakes in this process. And so to be able to look at how other people might be doing something with your loved one, with the person that you're caring for, is also another part of just letting go and letting them take their own path with it. And again, to be compromised as much as possible, or what are your boundaries around compromising? What are you willing to let go, and what are you saying, no, this is a no-go, I can't let go of this right now. Reconciling, so looking for harmony and finding out areas of agreement. And then accepting. What can you accept? What can we flex to have sort of a good enough, we talk about flexing our good enough muscle, and part of that accepting is that process of doing what we can and knowing that it's not going to be a completely perfect, we can't have those expectations. So this is a good, I think, statement saying about expectations from Fred Rogers. That's Mr. Rogers. Some days doing the best we can may still fall short of what we would like to be able to do. But life isn't perfect on any front. And doing what we can with what we have is the most we should ever expect of ourselves or anyone else. So here are some more suggestions for more difficult decisions. Honesty really starts with what we tell ourselves, right? Going back to knowing our own emotions and needs. And we also have to feel secure enough to be able to express these things. So there's support for this journey. You can start with a call to Family Caregivers of BC or healthcare agency. You can talk with like the cancer agency, for example, or a society where that is dealing with the particular issue that your loved one is experiencing right now, like a Parkinson's Society for people with Parkinson's. You want to start small. Work on one thing at a time. Make a list. That could be based on time, importance. And again, balance the pros and cons. Figure out what might be most effective and what you might need to work on or review. Here's another Fred Rogers quote. I had this one before, but I like it. So taking care is one way to show your love. Another way is letting people take good care of you when you need it. And that's what we're here for. So thanks. Thanks for all your patience.
Thank you, Tricia. We have a little bit of time just before 11 a.m. for some questions and time for response from Tricia if you have them. You can go to the Q&A box. On the screen, you will see our Family Caregivers resources. We have our toll-free support line that's from 8:30 to 7 p.m. from Monday to Friday for emotional support, navigating healthcare system, accessing our virtual support groups, and also referral to community resources. And then there's also a whole list and great resources for education on caregiving topics. So I just have one question that came in. Thanks, Sheila. This is from someone participating. I'm caring for my husband. He doesn't believe the diagnosis from the doctor and is uncooperative with his treatment, i.e. guilt drinking. I feel frustrated and the virus makes the doctor unavailable. So I don't know if there's a question there, but just something in terms of a reflection of what our caregivers are going through right now.
Yeah, that can be really hard, isn't it? Because you have a set of you have an understanding. You have a set, you have information that says to you that your partner is at risk, and yet he's just not there to be able to accept it right now. And so typically what we do with this is we wouldn't kind of force the idea of what it is on the person. So yes, you have this. Yes, you have this is what we intend. We just want the person to kind of absorb it and accept it. And instead we might look at the feelings. So what's hard for them right now, for example? What are they finding in their body? What experiences are they having? And then we might then notice that they're talking about fear, they're talking about pain. And those sorts of things are what bring up our defenses. Those sorts of things cause avoidance. So it could be like a sense of overwhelm with the symptoms where the person is just not wanting to talk about them right now. But there are other things that you could talk about within the person's environment and about their experiences that might help them feel more safe, and that might help the two of you get along that path of recovery a little differently. So that's part of those smaller steps that I was talking about. And then that feeling inside of you could come, right? That guilt and that fear and all the stuff about, come on, you've got to try and get help. And a way to look at that really is around your partner's sense of agency, their sense of independence. And you think they're making a mistake, but they're not there yet, and they're still being able to make a choice. And sometimes making a choice becomes the most important value for that person. They want to be the one who decides when they're going to start treatment or when they're going to accept what they have. And again, that is something then that you can say, okay, this person's made a choice. They're of clear mind, and I don't have to take responsibility for the outcomes for that, because that person's obviously wanting to take part in their care and wanting to have this go a certain way. And so it's almost like forgiving yourself and saying, I've just done everything I possibly could. And that's part of flexing that, good enough muscle. It's like, I've literally done everything I could here. I'm just going to sit and hold back and see what happens.
Thank you, Tricia. We have a few other similar to that with denying maybe the diagnosis or problems that leads then to caregiver struggle. So I think you did a really good job with explaining that. We have another question here. Without being able to see her mom, she went into care in March. She is very confused with the way things are. We hope we can go into the facility soon. I feel such sadness and guilt with her situation. How to move away from these emotions?
Oh, I know. I can only imagine how hard that is. Yeah. And the part of that is to recognize again that there are some really big issues at play that kind of they really do strip your choices away, don't they? And it's not only the virus, it's all of the institutional things that are actually meant to protect your parent. And so being able to know again that you're trying things as best you can, and perhaps looking at different ways to connect with them. And some people have talked about creating a weekly or bi-weekly message to the parent. I know a lot of times they can't get access to a phone, they can't get access to an iPad if they know how to use it anyway, because the staff are so stressed. So people have been sending their parent a card or a note, a drawing, or a photocopy of a picture that the parent of some place that the family used to go, for example, and putting the names of the people in that picture and where they were and what year, and sending that to the parent, so that and doing it on a regular basis. So then there's a sense of anticipation. One person I talked with last week was talking about sending a box every few weeks that has items in it that the person, that's tactile, so that can be opened up and the person can open it and touch it. And I know that there's staff rules around how long things have to sit before they open them, etc. So you'd have to look at each facility, but that's another way that they can kind of take in that sense that you care and be entertained by these little notions and these real tangible things that help them feel like you're still there for them. And of course, a lot of people in facilities can't remember. So they'll call you 3 times a day, like, why aren't you here? How come you haven't come today? And again, having to repeat that story of why you can't come can be very hard. But you really can just let them know you're thinking about them, and yeah, you're really doing the best you can.
We have another question around if you know of any resources for adult children having trouble accepting a parent's diagnosis and blaming other caregiving parents for having been neglectful or not following up. Maybe I'm not sure if you support or know of resources, and I'll send out an email follow up with resources as well. But if you have any insight.
I do have, there are many resources. I guess the first place I would try to look at is the agency who's the expert in that particular disease process. Those people usually have, even if it's a one-time or two-time connection with a social worker there, for example, or a counselor within that agency. Otherwise, there's different, counselors available, counseling services available, and those can be they can be, the charges sometimes are very low per hour for those. And I do have a list that I can send along to you later, Kate, that is available. Yeah, and otherwise it can be really, really hard, right, for that, to hear that, and then also cope with the blame of that, which is kind of like, oh, it's not even right, and I'm getting blamed, can be that feeling. But again, to be able to say, okay, he's in that place or she's in that place right now for whatever reason they need to be there. And usually it's because they're feeling angry. Usually it's because they're feeling helpless almost. And so that's kind of like transferring the responsibility onto other people, right? That's a safety behavior. They're transferring the responsibility of the illness perhaps onto another person. So as best you can, explore that that's their stuff right now. You'll do your best to be able to open up dialogue, but you don't have to accept. You can agree to disagree as well.
I'll finish with one more question because we started a little late, but what is the best approach to family members about getting further assessments since their memory is becoming a problem with self-care, dietary issues, and daily tasks? Again, that kind of decision making.
Okay. I don't know if you have a connection with home and community care, but that's a really good place to start, is your community health center, and looking at some processes of assessing whether that person is ready to stay at home or not. Your family physicians can also do some assessments, because there are questionnaires and assessments they can do even from Zoom. And also your story and observation of that person is an important story to tell the healthcare team. That is going to fill out the picture for them. Because sometimes people do really well in the office for 20 minutes. But then when the rest of the day, it's really like, there's a lot going on that the doctor might not see at that cross section. So your story and your description is important, but make it observational. Make it about what you see. Try and find patterns, try and find times of day, try and find patterns in behaviors, and then responses when you try to reroute the person or try to help them. All of these things become important information. And then the family doctor can be part of that referral process to home and community care. You can get a person comes into the home care assessor, and can look at what's going on. And that's happening even with COVID. So if you're feeling like you're really overwhelmed, just because there's COVID out there doesn't mean that people are completely isolated. It just means that you'll be met with a choice. Do you want someone in the home, and do you not? Or are there other ways to get respite that might be helpful for you? And then you weigh the risks and the balances, right? What are the risks and benefits of having a person in the home? And yes, COVID presents a risk, but so do other things like falls, like being completely overwhelmed and having, your own physical issues. Those are risks too. So that's part of that balancing of the risks and benefits in making a choice moving forward.
Thanks, Tricia. Yeah, I feel like a lot of the questions we get and are getting is definitely around either resistance of a diagnosis or next steps. But I really value, and I'm hearing you with looking at the behaviors that are presenting, if it's anger or, and maybe what the underlying emotion would be, such as fear and resistance, or you know, I think that that's really a mindful way to approach. And then your presentation did such a great way of really checking in and having those conversations in a way that might work differently or look differently.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. I'm going to be mindful of your time and the time of people joining. So I appreciate if you have any other questions. Again, you can follow up with myself. You can also, if you're needing specific one-on-one support, I really encourage you to call our support line. They're trained and they are there to support you. So thank you, Tricia, for your time, and thank you for staying so calm as we navigated our PowerPoint this morning. We did practice before, which is so funny, and this just happened. So thank you again, and it's always so lovely to work with you and have you, and you're so knowledgeable. So thank you again, and you will receive a follow-up email for joining this morning with any resources and some of these notes that Tricia shared. So thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much. Have a good day, everybody.
Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye.